and we're ready.
Someone has SpongeBob Bob in the background.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We are so excited to have all of you guys present and join us for this class. We have a fantastic project that we're going to take you through with a great instructor. Today, I'm joined by Philip Odango, who is an internationally renowned and award-winning cosplayer. One of his first projects was of Edward Scissorhands that he made out of garbage bags and old pizza boxes. Since then, Philip has designed and displayed numerous costumes that have been displayed around the world. He's taught at different workshops, universities, maker spaces around the globe. He's been featured in GQ, New York Times, Disney, and even Forbes, just to name a few. So I'm super excited to be joined today by Philip. Before I turn it over to him, I do want to just suggest that we have a very interactive class for you guys today. Feel free to use the comment box. Both myself and Allie, who you'll see, we are both from Fiskars. We will be helping to answer any questions that you guys have related to the product, the project, or cosplay in general. So we'll be able to stop Philip as well to answer those. So feel free, put your comments and questions into that comment box, and we'll be sure to get to them. Philip, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. My name is Philip Odango. I also go by Canvas Cosplay. I have been a creator and a maker for over 10 years now. Sometimes you just kind of lose count after a while. I've been involved in the professional theater community, in production and design, and I have also competed and judged numerous cosplay competitions all over the world. And as Kelsey mentioned, I also am a teaching artist, and I've really enjoyed the idea of being able to be creatively self-expressive and utilizing the tools and the materials to kind of make your creation come to life. And so with today's class, we'll be exploring how to make a foam sword using materials and tools that you can find at your local Michaels, and using cutting utensils, cutting tools from Fiskars as well. So this class is going to be set up as a walkthrough on how I was able to achieve making a sword that was inspired by Frostmourne from the World of Warcraft. It is smaller than Frostmourne, since that one is almost like 9 feet long. So with this particular class, I'm going to show you how the tools and the materials work together. So when you walk into a Michaels and you're looking at the cosplay section, how does the foam and how do the tools work together in order to kind of create whatever sword that you have in mind. I'll be covering today different types of EVA foam that you can find at Michaels, and also how to prepare the surfaces and seal the surfaces for crafting, the different types of adhesives that are used in putting together and joining foam pieces. And also I'll be touching on painting as part of the process of creating and designing your piece. And what you'll find in the chat is that there is a course pack, a PDF, where everything that I'm going over today is indicated on a slide, on different slides, and also linked to the different products and materials that I am going to be covering today. You'll also find a link to different runic fonts that you'll be able to download and use and print out, or use it as creative inspiration for making your own runes. And you'll also be able to download the template, which is a file that you can print out on multiple sheets of paper, where you can trace onto foam the silhouette of the sword and cut it out for yourself. So that resource will be available to you through the chat. And as Kelsey's mentioned, that if you have any questions, please put it in the chat and they will ask it as we go along. Now, I want to talk about tips for planning the build of your sword or your prop or even your costume. When you're thinking about your idea for design, start off by sketching your design onto paper, and then think about the measurements of how large you want this to be. I mentioned that Frostmourne in the video game World of Warcraft is very long. It's about 7 to 9 feet long. And so this is approximately 2 feet, 2.5 feet long. And so when you're thinking about the amount of material and supplies you're going to need, it's easy for you. It's much easier if you sketch it out and start taking some measurements of how big the dimensions you want it to be. Kind of a great tip is to measure twice and cut once. And so that'll help you with cutting down on your expenditures for your budgets and supplies. And what you want to do is when you're thinking about the overall dimensions of your prop, that helps you plan and budget the materials, tools, and the time that you're going to need in order to create your prop. There's also some consideration as you're in the planning phase on what elements are structural and what elements are more detail. And when I say structural, as we go through the EVA foam types, you'll understand, what pieces you'll need to reinforce will serve as reinforcement, and what pieces will also serve as more artistic details for your prop. And then lastly, as you're gathering your materials and making time for crafting, part of planning your build is to really remember how much fun that you're having doing it. Sometimes we get caught up in the tediousness of how do I do something technically and trying to get it right the first time. But part of cosplay is the play part. And that's an important part to remember as you're thinking about your build, how to enjoy it as well. Not every piece is going to be a competition piece. And so, sometimes you just want to make a prop for yourself. You want to make a sword for yourself that you want to play with and take photos with. And that's all fun too. So as we're going through this, just keep in mind that, when you're doing something for yourself, it's because you love doing it. And that's what Michael's brand is all about, is doing it yourself, creating it for yourself. All right, so let's talk about EVA foam. Now, you may have heard of the phrase EVA foam thrown around, but you're wondering, well, what is it actually? Well, if you probably go into your garage or a yoga studio or somewhere in your house, you probably have floor mats, and that is kind of the basic idea of what foam is. It is ethylene vinyl acetate, and so it is basically just a large sponge. And so when you go into a Michael's, you will see foam rolls that look like this in the cosplay section. So these foam rolls are basically large sponges, and they come in various thicknesses and densities. So density is an important aspect in working with foam because it will help reinforce the strength of what you're building. And so in Michael's, you have several different densities that are available. The largest or thickest of which is 12 millimeter EVA foam. And this sort of foam is approximately ½ an inch thick, and it's great for using for chest plates, for shields, for thicker pieces that require more dense structure. And it's also great for working with for foam swords as well. If you reinforce it, you can double it. The other size down from 12 millimeter is 8 millimeter EVA foam. And then you also have 4 millimeter foam. And then we get down to 2 millimeter and even down to 1 millimeter craft foam. So you have different sizes you can work with at Michael's, and what you'll find the foam rolls in the cosplay section. So 4 millimeter to 12 millimeter is used largely for structural pieces that can be layered on top of each other. So if you're working to build a sword or a shield or a chest piece or even a headpiece, you'll want to use the denser thickness EVA foam. You can also use the 4 millimeter, 2 millimeter for creating more detailed pieces. So if you're making some filigree on armor, if you're making some intricate, smaller designs that you're cutting out with a Fiskars tool, you can use this thinner foam for making those designs. And then you have craft foam, which is really great for just the top layer of design. So what you're going to be using this for any particular detail work that just requires just a minimum amount of product. Now, being able to work with foam, you're also able to use different types of dowels. And I constructed this particular sword using several dowels. And let me introduce to you some of the dowels you'll find in Joanne. So you have your traditional tubular dowel, which is it's approximately 2 feet long, and it is a fully circular dowel here. And what's great is that you can bend it, you can shape it. It is dense, so it's great for reinforcement. And I use these for the handles of the foam. So you'll see it here is that I've used this particular dowel as part of the handle in the structure of it. You also have a half dowel, which looks like a semicircle. And this particular dowel is also great for just using top level pieces. If you just need some reinforcing pieces, you can join two together to create a whole dowel. And so if you want to create some sort of, to strengthen it, you can use a wood piece or even like a kind of a paint stirrer to put in the center, or even a wooden dowel if you want to cut out a channel in the center as a way to reinforce it so it doesn't bend. So you have this half dowel as well. And then what I like to use is this type of dowel, which is a triangular foam dowel. And what's great about a triangular foam dowel is that you can layer them together. You can adhere them together to create kind of cool shapes and cool angles. And as you can see, they're all cut at a 45-degree angle, so you can join them together to create various shapes. And I'll talk a little bit more about cutting into foam. Some additional foam that you can find in Michaels is modeling foam. In the cosplay community, we call this foam clay because it really does feel like foam clay. And what this does is that it is almost like a kind of like a Play-Doh type consistency. And you can use this for sculpting little details. So if you wanted to create some jewelry or signets or even like little gemstones, you can use foam clay to create those. And what'll happen is that this requires an overnight cure, is that you can use it to sit overnight and it will function like regular EVA foam, which means that you can glue it, you can eventually sand it, you can seal it, do everything that you do with EVA foam, but in a much more kind of a elaborate fashion. And what's great about foam as a modeling tool is that you can also use the Evil Ted cosplay molds that are available in the cosplay section. And for this particular design of my sword, I use the dragon. I use the dragon mold to create the dragons on the sword itself. So you see some of these details here. These dragons were created with the Evil Ted cosplay mold. And what you do is you take the modeling foam and then you press it right into the mold, like so. And you want to use as much of the foam as possible to fill in all of the gaps, and just use your fingers to work your way into the already fabricated mold designed by Evil Ted. And when you go into the store, you'll find different types of molds, not just dragons. You've got heroes, you've got cogs, you've got different shapes. And you can also use this with baking molds as well, because these are all silicone sheets and they work very much the same way as if you were making a cookie. And then you stuff that in there and you let it sit overnight because you want this to take shape and to air dry. And when it is dry, you pop it out of the mold and then use it as needed for your design. So it will look something like that. Let's see if we can get a better idea of how it's used. And so I use 3 of the dragon molds here to create the dragons on the sword. Now, fun tip is that you can also use this particular mold, because it is silicone, with a hot glue gun. And what's great about it is that this will come out as an EVA foam mold, but if you use a hot glue gun, which is basically plastic, you can use that to fill in here into the, just like that. It'll take a few glue sticks, so be patient with it, and please be safe when handling anything that's hot. So when you fill in the mold receptacle itself, you can let it sit overnight, and if you are impatient like me, you can stick it in the freezer and it will cool much quicker. And then when it's fully cooled, it will become opaque, almost a gray or white, and then you can pop it out and then use that as a piece. So a lot of folks use this method to create gemstones as well. There's a whole process of sculpting and casting different types of gemstones, but this is a quick and easy way of being able to use the cosplay molds in order to create some structural pieces, some decorative pieces for your sword. So put this one aside. And so remember that the foam, this particular foam, takes about 24 hours to fully cure. So make sure that you make time in between your processes to let it sit and let it cure. And for those of you who aren't familiar with curing, the idea is that you needed to let it sit so that it will take form and the air will dry it out and it will maintain its structure and design. Great. All right, so now let's talk about cutting EVA foam. Now, I'm showing you some of my favorite pieces that I've used in putting together this sword. I have a variety of Fiskars tools here that I'm going to be walking through with you on how they are used and what it's best used for. So I'm going to put this sword aside. I'll refer this to it again. First, I want to talk about using our snap knife here. It's a utility knife that allows you to snap off the blades as you go along. Now, this knife is great because you can use this for adjusting how much area that you want to cut off. So when you're working with EVA foam, and I'm going to use this this triangular dowel here, it's a great way to be able to gauge or make some angled cuts. And in doing so, you can easily create angled cuts by setting your knife at a 45-degree angle or whatever angle that you want. And then just cutting through the material like so. And as you can see here, we now have an angled cut. And I mentioned before that I like using these type of dowels because they're already at a kind of a triangular angle, and you can actually join them together. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to make another cut here. I'm just going to go straight down for demonstration purposes. So how I made the body of this blade is joining 3 pieces of triangular dowels together. So joining these together, I'm able to make the body of the blade itself. So you have 3 angled areas 1, 2, 3. I'll talk a little bit more about the runes in just a bit. So now that you have like the body of the blade itself, and of course you can use more material and join them all together, that gives you room to glue all of these together, and that'll give you a nice blade body. Now you can, depending on how you design your sword, you might want it to be flatter or longer, and you can join different pieces as you want. But this is a great way in order to get a sword started, are just using these triangular dowels, which is what I did. So the snap utility knife is great for making these angled cuts. You can be very obtuse with them. You can be straight on with them, but they're just really great to cut through kind of dense materials and dense foam structures. I want to talk a little bit about, I think it's my favorite tool, which is the power cut shears. Now, this is already well loved, as you can see. I use it all the time. What's great about these power cut shears is that this can cut through not only fabric, vinyl, denim, foam, dense materials, heavy pieces, and it's really great for just cutting around corners as well. I've used this for 8mm foam. It just cuts very, very easily. As you can see, it's just cutting right on through like that. You can use it for 12mm foam as well. So, and it just cuts right through it like butter. So it's really wonderful to use. It's great all around. I use it with cardboard, corrugated materials. It's a wonderful, just overall cutting shear. And it's comfortable to use as well. So I like to use these particular shears if I'm just doing circular or rounded cuts, and it's really comfortable and easy to use. So even if you have a 12mm or 8mm thickness EVA foam, it just powers right through it. I think that's why they call it the power cut. But it's really just great overall tool to use. What I also like to use is the Easy Change knife set, which looks like this. So this is the angled blade that it comes with. And when you open the set, it comes with all kinds of different types of blade tips. And what's wonderful about this is that if you're going to cut different types of runes or cut different types of thickness materials, like there's a little mini saw here as well if you have denser materials you want to work with. This gives you an opportunity to change out the blades themselves in order to kind of create what you want. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to work with the craft foam that we have here. I'm going to draw a quick rune of sorts here. So let's do, all right, so let's do P for Philip, and you can use your detail tool to easily just cut those runes out. So obviously this is a large lettering, but it's giving you an idea of just how easy it is to work with these particular tools. And always just exercise caution whenever you're working with any of these tools. And just easily pop out the letters that you need. Now, if you want to do something much more exotic in lettering, you can download the resource pack. There's a link to the runes that are free and for personal use that you can use to kind of create your own different types of runes. And what I've actually created here, so you can read it better, is Fiskars, Fiskars. And so I cut them all out using this particular blade. Now, you can also use these additional blades here if you're working with thick foam and you want to draw some details into your foam as well. And I'll talk a little bit about utilizing the heat gun in order to open up the foam a bit and sealing the foam. But you can also use these saws if you're using thicker or dense materials like cardboard or even balsa wood. And you can also use these different curved blades as well if you need to do some tight rounded corners on thicker materials. And if you're making some details, top cuts on thicker foam that are more angled or more flat, you can use these blades as well. So they're great with working with wood and they're great with working with foam. For detail work, I prefer to use the standard blade that it already comes with, and you get 2 of them in this particular kit. All right, well, let me talk about the other great tool that you can use, which is your rotary tool. Now, this is a fantastic tool because it's just absolutely wonderful if you're going to make some detailed slices or cuts. So you have all of these kind of thin ridge details that you can easily cut out of foam using a rotary tool. And so you can just use that to go ahead and make your straight cuts very quickly. And you can also use a ruler if you want to, use a guide for straighter cuts. But what I like about this particular tool is that you can use them to quickly create different edge details. So that's with the craft foam. And also, if you want some thicker ones as well, you can use like 4mm EVA foam as well. And you'll get thicker, denser foam cuts that you can easily use for your ridges here. And you can also use it for, it requires a little bit more effort, upper body strength, but you can also cut through the 12mm foam as well. So it's a great overall useful tool for making some very quick cuts. In addition to foam, you can use it with fabric, with wood, like very thin wood. You can use it for thermoplastics as well. And it's a great way of making some detailed cuts like these that you can use for your sword. So you can take these and use that to create raised edges, corners, pieces of that. All right, and then now we have our just handy dandy razor edge scissors as well. So I use, a separate scissors for fabric, but this particular model of scissors is a razor edge, and it's great for just everyday cutting, whether you're working with fabric or denim or heavy materials or even foam. And what I like about this is that you can use this to just create more precise cuts. So if you're going to be making, and you'll find this again outline in your downloadable PDF, you can use your scissors to make more precise cuts and use those easily. So this here is the 4mm foam that was traced upon. You can easily trace that right on here. Just to give you an example. And again, you can customize this to however you'd like it to be. And then just quickly, you can use your power shears or you can use your pair of scissors So just cut right through it and give you a bit more precision in what you're making. Or I'm just going to cut it off right there. So now you can use this to attach to different pieces, like so. Great. I'm going to do a question check. Any questions from our chat so far before we start talking about working with adhesives?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay.
And in the chat, yep, we're good to continue.
Okay. Awesome. Great. So now we're going to be talking about surface preparation for joining. You know, when we're looking at our foam pieces, it's like, oh, you know, I can go straight from here into gluing these together. But something to think about, you know, with EVA foam is that this is called closed coil or closed end foam, which means that when they're tightly woven in here. However, in between the gaps, it allows different types of paints to be absorbed just like a sponge. So what we want to do is to be able to seal the surface of the EVA foam using a heat gun. And if you don't have a heat gun, so a heat gun looks like, you know, this. If you don't have a heat gun, you can also use a hair dryer on high heat. But what the heat gun does is that it closes the surfaces of the EVA foam so that it doesn't absorb whatever you're putting on it. So when you're thinking of like a sponge and you put something on a sponge, it gets quickly sucked into the surface of the sponge itself. It's very similar to foam as well, where if you think of a makeup sponge, you don't want the product to be sucked into the sponge. And the similar idea of makeup on your skin, you create, you know, a bit of a barrier. And so the heat transforms the surface of the foam into more of a closed surface so that paints and other products don't get sucked into the foam itself. Now, you can also use your tools to do some engraving on the surface of the foam. And what that does is that it allows you to create some intricate designs, and then you can use the heat gun to open up those creases. So if you're doing some sort of like wood grain texture, maybe you want to do some like long cuts on here to kind of simulate some wood textures or wood lines. Might be a little bit hard to see white on white, but there's a surface area here. And you would take your heat gun and what happens is it'll open up the surface, those lines where you have cut into. There we go. Now it's showing up a little bit more. Barely see it, but you can see how it's starting to deepen those creases and cracks where you have it. So that allows you to really paint those gaps in with a contrasting color. So if you were to do like just a dry brush of a black or a darker color over this, it'll fill in those gaps and kind of give you that wood grain or whatever texture that you want. There we go. I think it's showing up a little bit better. So cutting into the foam allows you to kind of give it some really interesting textures as well. There we go. Okay. Now, what you also want to do is that when you're thinking about gluing your pieces together, like it's easy to think about, okay, well, let me just glue it straight on like that. However, you need to be able to create some sort of kind of crevice or rough texture in order for the glue to adhere on, so that it will join the two pieces correctly on there. One way of doing this is to take sandpaper and then roughen up the surface of your pieces you're gluing together. So you want to have in a sandpaper that will create a rough texture on it and then adhere them together. Or you can do something similar to what we just did here, and you want to create some, lack of better words, like just hash marks across it, like tic-tac-toe marks on the surface of your foam. And what that does is that it creates kind of a rough texture for glue to kind of sink into, and you want to do it on both sides.
Hey, Philip,
Yes.
we have a question in the chat.
Great.
Mrs. McHenry is asking, it looks like you prefer to use a ballpoint pen to draw on the foam. Do you prefer that over a pencil or a permanent marker? And does it matter one way or the other?
Yeah, so so I'm using a ballpoint pen for demonstration purposes. Preferably you would use a not pointed, as sharp of a tip. So a marker could work really well, since it doesn't puncture the surface of the foam itself, because it will stay, on the surface of the foam. You can also use a very light pencil or a dull pencil that without a sharp end to it. Again, you don't want to puncture the foam as much. Or if you don't care as much, you can use a ballpoint pen, or if you know that it's going to be covered up anyway. So that's a really great question, and I think it really depends on the visibility of how you see those puncture marks on there. It's a great question.
Awesome,
All right.
thank you.
Yeah. All right, so now I have some pieces here that are have grooves in them, and I'm just going to hit it with the heat gun just to seal, open up those edges a little bit more. You could probably see it. So now that we have kind of these creases on here, I'm going to talk a little bit about different ways of how you can actually glue these together. So there's different types of adhesives that are available when you go into Michaels. The most common one that you'll see used by most crafters is called, it's a contact cement called Podge. So Podge is a pretty universal industry practice contact cement. It's very much for all purposes, all different types of materials. And it is permanent. It does have an overnight cure time, 24 to 48 hours. However, it is toxic and is best used outside or a well-ventilated area. It's got all kinds of dangers on there. However, it's really the type of contact cement that's best suitable and used for different foam types. However, you also want to make sure that you want to wear a mask when you're working with this and you're in a well-ventilated space. So how Podge cement works is that you apply with a brush on both surfaces, and then you join the surface, and then you let it sit for probably about 2 to 5 minutes. 10 minutes is more ideal to let it get tacky, and then you adhere it together like so, and then you can secure it with rubber bands or clips or however you want to secure it so that it stays joined together, and you want it to cure overnight. So the best way of adhering these foam pieces together is all-purpose contact cement. And you can find Podge cement at Michaels. And if you look inside of the PDF that's attached in the chat, these products are linked straight onto the Michaels website, so you can find the products directly. What I like to use, which is kind of overall, is hot glue. So I've got my hot glue gun. I'm using the Gorilla Glue stick here, and it's just a pretty much universal adhesive. So fun tip in working with your hot glue gun, you can use the flat part of your glue gun to just kind of like to even out the glue on top of it. So even though you're adding in glue straight down, you can use the flat part of your glue gun tip to kind of just flatten out the adhesive. Depending on how strong it is, you might need 2 coats on both sides. For this demo, I'll just use 1 coat. And simply just glue them together. And the reason why you did the etching on both sides is so that the glue can kind of seep in and create a bond between the 2 sides. And so the cure time for hot glue gun is approximately 5 minutes or less. You need the cool air to solidify the plastic, which is basically what hot glue is. It's plastic polymer, and it'll just glue those pieces together. Now, other glues that you can also use hot glue, super glue. You can also use like a wood filler. There's a different types of wood glues that you can also use for for foam, but there's also foam glue. So foam like also acts like a rubber. Like if you're familiar with like the soles of your shoes, it's very much a similar concept. They have rubber adhesives that you can also work. But for overall just everyday use, between contact cement and hot glue, you're going to be just fine. Now, if you're working with tiny details, such as these strips here, and you want to add them onto your surface, you can also use some kind of a minimal amount of hot glue, but be very careful with working with hot glue. I'm still recovering from some hot glue burns myself. It's kind of a point of pride for some crafters. You can also use just your everyday super glue to give you a finer surface area to add on your details. Now, you'll see here that there are gaps that occur when you join pieces together. Now, this can easily be filled in with a variety of different materials. Very common is to actually just use the hot glue itself and then very carefully fill in those gaps there and then use the flat edge to even it out. However, it does look a little bit clunky and chunky. So it's not that great of an accuracy tool. You can also use wood filler, which you can find in the wood department in Michael's. Wood glue. You can also use caulking, which is used mostly for tile work, but it's a nice gap filler. And for larger gaps, you can also use modeling foam. You take just the slightest bit. Let's see if I can show it here.
Hey, Philip, while you're opening that, we had another question about whether or not you prefer a high temp or a low temp glue gun when you're assembling.
Yes, so great question. So high temp guns are really great if you're working with a large surface area and you're using these longer glue sticks. I use the soft temp guns if you're working with just finer details and you have a little bit more or a little less surface coverage and a bit more precision. So the soft temp allows you to make those tinier filigree details. And some of them have different tips as well. Some of them have, some glue guns have kind of a fine point nozzle where you don't want the hot glue to come out as quickly. You want it to be a bit more controlled. So you have a couple of different options. Because I work with larger pieces and I work pretty quickly, I like to use the hot temp with the long glue stick. So I just run right through it. Hopefully that helps answer.
Yeah, great. That's perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is also an option. I'm using the modeling foam. Again, this is a way to fill in the gaps. And what happens is that when you let this dry overnight, you can then sand down like the excess. It works like the similar idea to caulking, where you're joining the the edges together, and you're basically creating a gap fill between the two, and you can use sandpaper when it's all dry, or a sanding tool like a Dremel tool to kind of just sand off excess material. All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about preparing the surface for painting. So now you're going to get from here to here. You know, what is that in between part? So I mentioned earlier the need to utilize a hot gun or a heat gun in order to seal the cells on the surface of the EVA foam, and it kind of gives it a bit of a stronger structural support as well. But we also want to be able to prepare the surface of this for painting so that it creates an even stronger barrier between the surface of the foam and whatever kind of paint that you're going to be using on top. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. I like to work with Podge, which is by Plaid, and it's water-based, and it's a sealer. And it's basically a similar concept to using white glue and mixing it with water to just create a barrier. Similar idea to creating a surface barrier between your skin and your foundation in the world of makeup. So I like to use Mod Podge as a way to create that barrier between the foam and paint. This does require an overnight dry, and Mod Podge comes in different types of formulas for different purposes. This is just a generic gloss Mod Podge, but you can get some for different utility, different types of surfaces that you're working with. And I also like to use, and this comes down into your planning as well, Plasti-Dip. So Plasti-Dip is a rubber coat. And what this does is that once you kind of fill in all the gaps and you're ready to paint, Plasti-Dip will create a rubber surface for you to paint on. Now, Plasti-Dip comes in different colors. If you're thinking about using metallic paints, such as the Plaid Effects gold or any kind of armor or metallic paints, it's great to start off with a black surface area. What that does is that it absorbs the light that's shining onto the surface, and it reflects back the metallic color of the paint that you're using. And so if you know that you're going to paint something with a metallic sheen or a metallic color, it's best to start off with a all black surface area to then be able to kind of create that very saturated looking color with your paints. Plasti-Dip can come in a variety of colors as well. In addition to black, you've got if you're working with like blues and greens, it's great to work with gray Plasti-Dip because it kind of creates a very neutral background. If you're working with, if you know that your surface area is going to be red, you can also get a tan Plasti-Dip or a yellow Plasti-Dip. It'll help kind of pull in those saturated red tones. And Plasti-Dip also comes in a clear coat as well if you're pretty agnostic about how you want to paint. Plasti-Dip also comes in different types of sheens as well. There are some where it kind of has a metallic looking aspect to it. It's kind of a color shift as well, but we're getting more into the fancier finishing. But in order to just start the painting process, Plasti-Dip is a really good all-around go-to area or product to use that you can find at Michael's. Plaid also has an acrylic primer that they use. So Plaid products kind of look like this. And so they have a clear version of their acrylic paint, which serves as a primer, and you can just use it to coat, just like similar to Mod Podge. Plaid Effects, Plaid, the company, makes both Plaid Effects and Mod Podge, so it's the same company. You'll find the Plaid Effects paints in the cosplay area, and you'll find Mod Podge in various areas throughout Michaels as well, mostly in the wood section, wood and crafting. But there's a spray Mod Podge as well, if you're looking for that. More technically advanced kind of surface preparation materials are an acrylic emulsion, which is basically acrylic paint, like a urethane coat, and also epoxy resin, which is a marine epoxy, which is used to coat the underside of boats. And those are a bit more advanced, but those will create a much sturdier seal and much harder surface area for you to paint on. All right, and some painting tools. These are the colors that I use to create this sword. And so what's fun about the painting process is that you can be kind of very creative on how you mix and match different sorts of colors. And what I like about the Plaid Effects colors is that you have a nice variety to choose from. You have different satins, different kind of neon colors, you have different metallics, and you can play around with it to kind of create the contour, lightness, contrast that you want, for your particular sword. And so here, I'm just going to line up kind of particular areas that I use so you can get an idea of just kind of color variation of products. So you can see how you can use different colors to kind of create the effect of frost, the effect of lighting, the effect of contrast. I have overhead lighting on right now, so you really can't see it, but inside is the EL wire. So I'm going to show you where it's tucked in. So I have EL wire that runs through the sword, and inside of these runes here, it is illuminated blue, and it's much more prominent when it's dimmer. But this has a nice kind of blue effect that's complemented by the paint work itself.
Hey, Philip, as we
Yes.
have some people taking a look at some of the material from the class, we have a couple questions.
Yes.
What scale do you suggest printing the pattern to? Is it made for 100% scale?
Yeah, the pattern itself is the paper size is 30 inches long, 11 high. So that would be 8.5 by 11, and that would be 5 to 6, 8.5 by 11 sheets. So it would be like a portrait mode. So it's 11 inches tall, and then about 5 to 6 sheets wide.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
And then also we had one person asking, Deb was asking what the modeling clay was that you had been using before. If you could just review the name of that for some
Yes.
people who maybe joined a little bit later.
Absolutely. This is called the modeling foam from Art Minds. It's available in the cosplay section in Michaels, and it's about 11 ounces, which will actually get you a lot of surface area. Just making a note that you do need to plan when you want to use this because it does have a cure time. So you want it to set overnight. You can't just pop it into the mold and then expect it to be done in 2 hours. You do need to let it sit overnight, let the air dry it out so that you're able to work with it. Once it's dry, you can easily pop it out of the mold and then use a tool, a sanding tool to get the edges down. You can use your cutting tools to kind of cut around the edges, find details, but you do need to plan at least a day prior for it to cure. And this is called Art Minds Modeling Foam. And I believe I may have linked it in the PDF, so you can check that out.
Awesome, great. And then one other question that we had from Mrs. McHenry was, you've mentioned sandpaper a couple times and being able to use that. Do you have a recommendation on the grit of sandpaper that people should use, and maybe whether they should use sandpaper like standard wood sandpaper or the wet dry sandpaper for working with metal?
For working with foam?
With metal, like with working with metal.
Oh, with metal. Okay, so when you're working with sandpaper, there's a couple of different ways where you can wet sand it if you know that you're going to be working with a higher grit value. So if you're looking with like 300 or 400, you want to make sure that you don't break the surface of the foam. This is the best way to work with sandpaper on foam is to make sure that there's already it's dry, and that you're not going to rip off the surface of it unless you want a textured surface on the foam itself. But if you're looking to like clean up some of these edges here, you want to make sure that it is fully dried. I would recommend even doing like a coat of Mod Podge or a coat of some sort of a protectant, so that when you do go back in with your sandpaper, you can easily smooth it out. When you're doing fine details, such as like the tinier pieces here, which are easier to rip, you want to start off, always start off first with the lowest coarseness and then work your way up, just so that you don't end up damaging or breaking the surface of the material. Now you're working with metal. I think that's where you're going to have to really take a look on what the type of metal it is and the corrosiveness of it. I haven't had to use sandpaper on metal. However, if you're creating like a metal type texture and using metallic paints, normally metal is flat and has a flat surface. If you're looking to create corrugated metal, there's a couple of different effects that you can use with paint and combination of surface area texturing that will kind of create the effect of sanded or chipped metal. I know that's probably not what you're looking for in terms of sandpaper and metal. However, there are different sanding tools that you can use to kind of create ridged edges. It's kind of similar to this. This is all just hand painted on here. But you wanted to kind of create that effect of kind of a chipped edge or a tarnished edge. There's a couple of different ways you can do that with paint as well. You could probably do a longer talk about painting effects.
Awesome. We do have one more question, but I did want to mention that you will see Felicia with Michaels is posting a special coupon code for everyone who joined today. So you can go ahead and use that coupon code for maybe purchasing any supplies for your next cosplay creation. It is a 30% off coupon, so enjoy that. And thank you to everyone who attended today with Fiskars and Philip and Michaels. And then our last question that it looks like we have right now is asking about running the lights through the sword and how you get them to show up. So are you using just holes through the foam or acetate, anything that you use to accentuate the light?
Yes, so what I have here, so you can see on the surface area here is that I had cut through, I don't know if you can see it in the other view. I had created a layer of foam, which is approximately, where is the 4mm foam here? So I use a 4mm foam to cut the runes. And then what I had done is, you see how I said it was joined like this, which is kind of three triangular pieces. What you want to do is actually, if you look at the bottom, you want to move. I'm gonna rip this real quick so I can show you very quickly.
Hey Philip, this is Felicia. Just so you know,
Hi.
your overhead is no longer showing.
Okay. Well, let's see the front of it. So what you want to do is end up with a gap. I'm going to show it to you this way, where you have the centerpiece here is a bit more inset than the other two pieces. And what happens is it creates a channel where you can lay your lights inside the channel here. And so you'll have a channel where you can run your lights up and down. So let's pretend this is a longer piece here. You can run your lights up and down the channel here, and then use a piece of foam that has your runes on it, and it layers right on top of that channel so that your lights are sandwiched in that channel between these other two pieces. So what I'm showing you here is that in this sword, you've got the two diagonal pieces that are on the side. And then on the center piece here is actually more inset into the sword. And then I took a piece of foam that is approximately 2 inches wide that runs all the way down, that has the runes on top of it. And underneath the surface is the light system underneath it. So hopefully that will help kind of give a better idea. I am going to be talking about lighting a little bit more in a future class. So hopefully you can catch that piece and we can talk a bit more through how to rig it.
Wonderful, awesome. That was a great explanation.
All right, so we are now at time, but I do want to talk a little bit more just about now that you have your piece painted. A great way to preserve your item is to seal it. Rust-Oleum has a great product called it's a clear coat. It's a durable top coat that you can just use it to seal the overall product itself. Again, you can use Mod Podge as a way to seal your product, and you can also use epoxy or urethane, polyurethane available at Michael's to kind of give it a much harder, more durable coat so that you can use it throughout your sword, throughout your photography, and it'll withstand some beating as you battle the scourge and torment the enemies. But it's also great for photography as well. This has a clear coat that I use with the Rust-Oleum. It's a durable top coat. You can see it in the paint section in Michael's, and I'll kind of just help preserve it a little bit more. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you got a lot of insight about working with foam, particularly helping prep it, seal it, join it, and hopefully next time we'll talk a little bit more about how to use foam with thermoplastic to create even more structured pieces, and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into lighting as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Philip, for joining with Michaels and Fiskars to highlight how we can make an Ice King sword. It was great. And thank you to everyone for joining.